Hello, is this George Steele?
It is.
How are you doing?
I'm doing great.
This is Dustin Wilmus from KMSU in Minnesota. And are you ready for a couple questions today?
I can handle a couple.
Okay, well, first of all, I'll introduce you to my co-host, Ton.
Hi there, how are you doing?
I'm doing great.
I'm glad to hear it. I'm really glad to get you on the show here today, and as long as you're ready, we'll go right ahead.
Let's do it.
Well, I guess first, can you talk to us a bit about how you got started in the wrestling business?
Hey, you! Hey! Do you want to talk to George or Jim?
Well, either one's fine with us.
Hey, you really... George, make no sense. I think you want to talk to Jim.
All right, we'll take Jim then.
Okay. You're a little slow on that one, but we got it. Basically, there's two people using this body. That's just a fact. I was a school teacher and a coach, making $4,300 a year. Was not a wrestling fan. I was a football guy with bad knees, and was looking for a part-time job so I could afford to teach. I was making, $4,300 wasn't cutting it with the two children, the third one on the way. And a friend of mine was a huge wrestling fan. He talked me into calling Bert Ruby, the local promoter, and I started running around Michigan for about 4 or 5 years with a mask and a cap and gown when wrestling as a student. Was doing quite well, and Bruno Sammartino came to Detroit to the Cobo Arena, and I was on the card, and we met, and I was invited by his entourage to Pittsburgh, and they didn't want a mask man. I didn't want to use my real name because of the teaching and the coaching, so George Steele come out of because Pittsburgh's a steel city. Somebody said, hey, this is a steel city, and I jumped all over that, but I didn't want to be Jim Steele. Somebody said George, so that half of my body's only about 46 years old.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit about that first run you had and, working with Sammartino in Madison Square Garden?
Okay, yeah. Actually, it started in Pittsburgh. We had a run there. It got over. They were looking for somebody. Vince McMahon Sr. was looking for somebody new in Pittsburgh. New York, business was kind of dragging. They invited 3 people in. Bull Ramus, a fellow by the name of the Kentucky Butcher, Virgil, the Kentucky Butcher, and George Steele. And the new gardens had just been opened. They'd closed the old gardens, Madison Square Gardens, and it was kind of slow there. But the place that was really hot at the time and getting over was the Boston Gardens. And the way Vince Sr. did things was a little different. He put names in the book, and it didn't matter if you drew or not. That's how he ran his business. And he had Bull Ramus in for one shot in the Boston Gardens, and they sold out. And but that was one shot. So the next guy in was Virgil, the Kentucky Butcher. He had 3 shots in the book, and he started off a little bit less than a sellout, and by the time he had his third shot, it was about half empty. And then it was my turn, and we popped it 3 times. And so from then on, George Steele had a place to go for summer vacations every year. It was a part-time job. It was a fantastic part-time job. In the hub of pro wrestling, you got Boston, Philadelphia, New York, and all the big markets, big arenas, and large populations. So the money was very good. Bruno was a great champion. It was an ethnic champion at the time, and that was huge. Then they brought in Pedro Morales after that. Still an ethnic thing, but his background and the people were so violent that they were afraid to stay with it. So they jumped back to Bruno. And that covered about a 15-year period.
Yeah, can you tell us a little bit after, when it kind of became more of Vince McMahon Jr.'s thing and you developed the animal gimmick, can you tell us a little bit about how that unfolded?
Well, the animal thing started in 1970 as a heel. And it stayed that way till 83 probably, 84. And then Vince Jr. took over. The business changed. It became more of the promotion and the production than it did the wrestling. They were selling, I think, lunch buckets, that kind of stuff, more than wrestling. And the cartoon figure that I became fit right in perfect with that. We had the Hulk Hogan thing going, WrestleManias, and it was just huge. But a totally different take on the wrestling business, what we had in New York and the Northeast and in Minneapolis and in all the other territories around the country. The wrestling business became a different business. It was a rock and roll type business. It was a high-end business. When I first went out east, and in the Detroit area when I first started, tickets were $3. Now I think they're $1,000 for WrestleMania.
Yeah.
So it's a totally different business concept.
Well, was it difficult staying, in character as the animal and, cutting promos and not being able to kind of do more of the traditional style? Or
No, not at all. I was doing, when I first went out east, the Northeast, I did all my own interviews. I had no managers. I talked coherently. It was the way I did things. And then they decided, because, they didn't know if they're going to use me or not on a regular basis. The first year I went in, so I got over. We sold out a lot of arenas, so they brought me back the next year. Then the third year they said, hey, we better give him a manager that can talk for him while he's back in school teaching. So that's how I first got my first managers. Then when Vince, I call him Junior, the fellow that's running the business now, came aboard, and now I'm still a heel. He said, he's making too much sense for an animal. And so he put the mic in front of me, and I went, hey, you. And he said, that's what I want. I went, oh, crap, that's not what I want. But it put a handcuff on me in a certain way, so I had to really do more of the business with my expressions and actions that I did with words, which really worked out because wrestling is a business of words. And I bypassed that with just the character that I was portraying.
And that's where sort of the green tongue and, biting the turnbuckles and stuff fit in then?
All that was by accident. I mean, none of that was, back then we didn't have a creation team like they have now. I'd had a couple of drinks one time, and this is black and white TV. It had just gone over the hill, and it was color TV. I didn't even realize it. I had a couple of Clorettes in my mouth for better breath, and the switchboard lit up. Why is his tongue green? I thought that was funny. About 2 months later, I thought, well, I'm going to do that green tongue thing again. So I threw a couple of Clorettes in, the same reaction. From then on, I had the best breath in wrestling. And then with the turnbuckle, they used to, in black and white TV, this goes way back, they used to give away gifts to get people to come to the TV studio. That's where we did our promotions. We made our money in the arenas at that time. And this one particular time, they gave away couch potatoes. Couch pillows for couch potatoes, I guess I should say. These real tight satin pillows, and some lady got mad at me and threw one. There was about 300 people in the studio, and I knew if I threw it back, I was going to get bombed with 300 pillows. If I sat on it, it was going to be boring, so I bit it. This thing exploded. It was packed so tight, and I started throwing it in the air, and I got a hairy body. It was sticking on my hair like the abominable snowman. And then I took the pillow and stuck it over my opponent's head and started choking him. When I pulled it off, he was blue because the stuffing was lighter than air. Every time he took a breath, it went down in his throat, and I almost killed him. When I went to the dressing room, wrestlers being like they are, they said, wow, that was pretty good. You almost killed that one. If you get somebody to throw a pillow at you every night, you'd have something. And one of the fellows said, yeah, maybe you could eat the turnbuckles, and we all laughed. About 2 weeks later, I was having a match with Jay Strongbow, and the match just wasn't getting it done. So I looked at the turnbuckles. I thought, well, let's try this. I went over and took a snap at it. The old Everlast tore easy. I started rubbing the stuff in his face, and from a blah match, we had a riot. So from then on, I started eating a lot of Clorettes and tearing a lot of turnbuckles. All by accident, no plan whatsoever. I think God was in control of that part of it.
Yeah. Well, Ton and I grew up, in the era when you kind of turned into a good guy and were working with Captain Lou. And, was it difficult to make that transition from sort of the wild man into the fan favorite with the dolls and stuff you were talking about?
Not really. It was all by accident again. We had a six-man tag. I was with the Russian and the Iran, the Iron Sheik and Volkov. We were wrestling in an all-American team, and the idea was they were going to turn their back on me. They wouldn't tag me. And that was kind of, I was 50 years old. That was the end of my career, I thought, and they thought. So when we did that, I was left in the ring. I didn't know what to do. I'm just kind of acting kind of silly, and they sent Captain Lou back out, who had been my manager as a heel. So when he comes out, I don't know, I act like I'm going to fight with him, and I just drop on my knee and put my hand on his big belly, and he started patting my head, and the place went nuts. So it was an instant change. And in reality, I never changed much from being a heel to a babyface. I still got disqualified all the time for hitting people's chairs. I chased announcers. I did everything a heel did, but because of the character I was portraying, it turned into a love affair. And then they put Elizabeth in front of me. How can you fail with that?
Sure.
So it was just a natural, easy thing to do. And again, I never had any hang-ups about it. I was just I always realized that wrestling was a business, and that it was a great business, and a bit of a show business. So I just rode with it. I went with what was happening.
Yeah, you mentioned Elizabeth there. You ended up working with Randy Savage and even working WrestleMania 3. Can you talk to us about some of that?
Oh, yeah. We had a 2-year run. And everybody talks about Randy. Randy was a tremendous athlete. Now, you got to look back at, I'm 25 years older than Randy, and I wrestled his father years before that, and I knew Randy as a little boy. So when this thing started, it was like Randy was the ultimate professional. He was one of those guys that wanted to know step by step everything that was going to happen in the ring. That was never my style. Everything that happened in the ring, I called in the ring. So when we first get together, Randy had this 3 or 4 page notebook of how our match was going to go, and I took each page, looked at it, wrinkled it up, and threw it in a garbage can. I said, just listen to me, kid, we'll have a good match. And our 2-year run was, I think, one of the most memorable things in pro wrestling.
Yeah.
And it was like a marriage. We had our spats every now and then. It was never a love affair, really, but we had our spats, and it just worked out great. I think people still, it's 20 years later now, people still talk about the animal being smitten over Elizabeth and Randy being jealous. It was a great run, and it was a good way to end my career, by the way.
Yeah, and also a lot of people will say that match that Randy Savage had with Ricky Steamboat was the greatest of all time, and you were involved in that too. So that's definitely.
Well, we set that up with that thing I had going with Elizabeth and Randy. Set that up for that great match, and it was a great match. And it was the kind of match that Randy always wanted to have because everything was pretty much laid out in front. It was boring to me, to be honest with you, but I'm old school.
Well, who were some of your other favorite guys to work with over the years? Just a handful.
You started off with Bruno Sammartino, and then I mentioned Pedro Morales. Had a great run with Bobby Backlund. He was the champion of in the WWF for about 9 years. Had a great run with him almost every summer. Then I had coming in there was the Polish Power, Ivan Pudski. Then they started bringing people in from your area. We started getting the guy, Hulk came in from Minnesota. That was a pretty good deal to have a chance to work with him. And then you had, to me, one of the all-time greats was Kenny Patera, a power lifter from the Olympics. It just went on. Superstar Billy Graham. It just more talent just kept running through, and it goes all the way back to the beginning. Gorilla Monsoon. Then we had Bobby Heenan come in, I think, again from Minnesota. So we got a lot of folks from your area coming in that was top wrestlers, and we had them coming in from every territory. Ended up in the Northeast, in the expansion of the WWF, which is now the WWE, and Vince McMahon Jr. was just a man ahead of his time. I mean, he was a brilliant, had brilliant ideas on merchandising, on television. I'm not sure he was the greatest promoter I was ever around when it came to the actual wrestling part of it, but he surrounded himself with people that had that part of it down pretty good. It was a brilliant run. He's a billionaire for it.
So are you following the business at all today, or do you have any thoughts on that?
Oh, yeah, I have a lot of thoughts on it. First of all, I hear a lot of the guys my age knocking what's going on now. I'm not one of those guys. I think that the athletes they have today are superb athletes. They're better than what we were, but I think we were tougher. And I think they've got a better format to work on than what we had. Their production is out of this world, the pyro and all that stuff. But I watch their show. They have a 3-hour Raw show now, and I can watch that whole Raw show in about 25, 30 minutes because I tape it and I speed through it, and I see 2 or 3 faces that I want to watch, and that's kind of what I watch. The rest of it, the wrestling isn't what we did. It's a totally different business. Our matches were a lot slower. We didn't take triple bumps off the top rope and all that stuff. It was a totally different business. More psychology was used. It was more of an art than it is now. But I still respect everything they do, everything.
Well, and you have a new book that's coming out too, is that right?
Yeah, the book is very interesting. It ties the teaching and the coaching for 25 years in wrestling with one of the top names in the business in the Northeast, and then nationally and internationally, and still teaching. It was always a part-time job for me, and most people didn't realize that. They thought when I wasn't in the Northeast that I'd gone west to wrestle, but I had gone to the Midwest to coach high school wrestling and coach football, which was also my loves. And then when you start writing a book, you start looking at your life through a rear-view mirror, and you start understanding how things work. Because I had a learning disability. My book is about overcoming different huge challenges. And when I say a learning disability, I was dyslexic before they knew what it was. And as a little boy, I'd go in front of the class and try to read Run, Spot, Run, and couldn't do it, and the kids would laugh, and, it breaks your heart. My first success, we covered that, was getting in a fight and winning it. And so guess what I did for the next few years? And then when I got into high school, I was still dyslexic, and they would take roll and send me to the gym. So I become a pretty good athlete. I end up at Michigan State. How, having those challenges, how do you get into Michigan State? And somehow I graduated. I ended up teaching and coaching. I mean, how did all that happen? And I start looking back, and I understand there was a higher power that was really controlling me before I even accepted the higher power. I had Crohn's disease. There's no cure for Crohn's. I was deathly ill for 10 years. I was really stubborn. And that's what led me to the Lord Jesus Christ. And then I started understanding how my whole life worked. And now it makes a lot more sense to me. I'm not a Bible peddler or anything like that. I've been very blessed with my whole life as I look back at it before I knew Jesus, and it's just opened up so many doors for me now. We live in Cocoa Beach. We live on the ocean. We have a great lifestyle. I have my same wife of 58 years. Not many wrestlers can say that. And my children are all college graduates and doing very, very well. I've been blessed. And you know what? From a learning disability to becoming a superstar in the wrestling business gave me the confidence to have the successes that I had as a coach and my other successes. So the wrestling business has touched me all the way through. And you hear the stories about the wrestling business, the guys that died so young, drug overdoses, and all that nonsense. That's not the wrestling business. That's just people making poor choices when we became a rock and roll type business. That's kind of where I'm at. And the book just kind of sums it all up. Last October, believe this or not, 20-some years later, they named the football field Jim Myers Stadium after me. That is humbling. And how does that, wow.
Yeah.
Am I worthy of all this? Probably not, but God's been good.
It's definitely an awesome story, and we're looking forward to reading about it.
I hope you enjoy it. It's been a blessing. It really has. And I'm the luckiest man alive. I really believe that.
Well, again, it's been great having you on the show. We're huge fans. Do you have anything you want to leave us with? Any parting words?
Just thank you for taking the time to listen to an old guy.
It was our pleasure.
I'm 76 now, and I have people ask me every day, do you wrestle? You still wrestle? And I say, yes, to get out of bed. But it's been a gift. It's been fun.
Awesome.
All right.
Guys.
Well, thanks again so much.
God bless.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.